Hello, everyone. Welcome to Friday Live with Gladiator Consulting. My name is Rachel D'Souza. I am the founder and president, and I am very excited to have such a wonderful conversation today with my friend and colleague, Betsy Cohen. Today, we are talking about the current state of fundraising, philanthropy, what's shifting, what's hard, and most importantly, what we can do now to seed a successful future. So, Betsy, welcome. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Well, thank you, Rachel. I'm so happy to be here and have this conversation. I had a long corporate career, and part of that had been as a corporate futurist. And then I was the executive director of the St. Louis Mosaic Project, leading a nonprofit, governmental, working with so many in the community of nonprofits and funders that a year ago I left to join FutureGood and take my futurism skills to be a futuristic, philanthropic futurism, and take that skill set to the social sector and bring that ability to look forward. And then currently, how do we help visionary leaders of nonprofits and foundations and donors understand what it's going to take to meet the moment now?
That's awesome. I think you and I met when you were at the Mosaic Project.
Yeah.
And when I heard you were leaving, I was very nervous about what that meant. And then when I got the news from you that you had joined this sort of work of philanthropic futurism, I thought to myself, St. Louis is really lucky to be able to have you step into this space. So can you tell our audience just a little bit more about this concept and why it feels so important for nonprofits to sort of start to understand and navigate these ideas of philanthropic futurism?
I think that having a sense of hope and what is the North Star about what needs to be achieved and accomplished is something that can be uplifting. And I think that sense of where is the organization headed, where is the cause headed, helps people understand that they fit into a bigger long-term picture.
Yeah.
And when they understand that, they can come back and say, okay, maybe the landscape has shifted in the last year, but I can still make decisions and I can still have agency with what I need to do with the staff I have, with the clients that we serve in the community, and with those donors that care even more greatly today about what we do because the need is greater.
No, I feel that I am, slightly over 20 years in this sector, having managed programs, having done fundraising and strategy work. And I think right now, more than any other time, and my work in this sector feels very uncertain, very unstable. Things that I think we used to count on, rely on, things we saw as foundational are being wiped away, retracted, clawed back, are sort of crumbling under the pressure of all this change. And I think that a lot of nonprofit organizations, sort of even our most visionary leaders, have been a little nervous to think about what's possible. I think we often find ourselves trying to fix or build upon what is or what has worked. And there's, I think, some nervousness in the sector that if we take a risk or we try something hoping for a different future outcome and that risk doesn't pan out, that we're going to somehow, put our organization on poor footing, or we might lose the trust of a donor if we, have an outcome that isn't satisfying or isn't, what we thought. So when you're talking with nonprofit leaders, like, how do you bring them through this process of really being able to feel confident in this visioning and confident in these ideas of what practicing this type of futurism can mean now for us today?
It means that you have to have an optimism, and you also have to say what are the positives that can come out of a moment that sometimes can feel like scarcity and not abundance. So, whether it's AI and the worries about what AI means, but also then looking at what are the positives that AI can bring to extend the reach of what your organization is doing and extend your development team, extend the ability of putting things together. Also, I think it means that deepening trust with the donors that you have.
Mhm.
It's really important because that idea that you could mess up and people would be unhappy with you
Yeah.
goes against this view that if you have a stronger trust-based relationship with the people who are donors, you can say to them, we are trying something.
Mhm.
And donors need to understand that with you, that you have to experiment and you
Mhm.
have to experiment and you have to embolden your team to
Mhm.
feel that they are going to have the ability to try new things, because the same old way is not going to be a positive solution right now. You have to be
Mhm.
showing that you are trying new things. If you're stuck in a same old mode, you aren't going to get new funders. You're not going to get continued support of the donors or foundations that have been with you before.
That I love the way you're thinking about it. I have tried to always be a person that embraces an abundance mindset, or has tried to look at, various obstacles as opportunities, as sort of a path forward to innovate or experiment or to try. I love sort of hearing the idea. I think there's a lot of fear around AI too, but really sort of figuring out and reflecting on and building the processes for not just how um, not just with this idea that AI is going to take our jobs or AI is going to put us out of work, but really how do we use AI as a tool to do our work better, faster, with more opportunities for deeper connection. I don't think that people have sort of adopted that mindset with AI. And I also really love hearing you say it is really now time for organizations to do something different. I think we know that the definition, what is it, of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. I think there are plenty of organizations who have the curiosity, they have the interest, they have a kind board who are ready to step into that space, and perhaps the only thing that's holding them back is that they haven't done it before. We don't know what might happen if we try something differently, but it doesn't sound like being scared is enough to not try at this point. With some of the organizations that you have worked with, how have you heard in this moment that um, what are they telling you about what they're experiencing, or what are they telling you that they're hearing from their donors, and how are they sort of responding or reacting to that information?
I think that they have to be willing to explain to their donors that a lot of things are breaking right now, and we're going to see more things breaking in the next few years. And then you have to be able to rebuild. And so the question is coming up with ways to explain that rebuilding in a way that is logical. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that it also means you have to show stories and examples
Mm-hmm.
of what happens when things get rebuilt. Or, for example, um, John Burroughs School is experimenting with a digital development engagement officer. And so,
Okay.
you
Wow.
know,
Okay. So
it,
that's a local school that's here in St.
correct.
Louis. It's an independent, is it middle school and high school?
Yes. And
Okay.
so
Yeah.
they are looking at, again, extending the reach of their development team with a new technique of using an AI avatar to interact with some of their alumni. So again, looking for examples where people are experimenting to
Hmm.
see if they will use AI to get more new results.
Sure.
It's not a matter of taking away a development job, but you're adding to what you can do when you can't add another person. So looking for those bright spots. The other
Mhm.
thing I think is helping to educate donors that, for example, your organization is moving forward with easier ways to use mobile donations for
Yep.
younger donors,
Yep.
that you are understanding how donor advised funds are increasing in importance. And so that a
Mhm.
donor advised fund where a donor is putting money away tax free into a donor advised fund, and then
Yeah.
later they're allocating it to you, and being savvy about that. So, for example, we now have October 8th coming up, will be Donor Advised Fund Day. And,
Oh, okay.
and
Okay.
so everyone knows what Giving Tuesday is.
Mhm.
You know, you rally donors to give
Mhm.
on that day. Well,
Mhm.
Donor Advised Fund Day on October 8th is a day to talk to either people you know who have a donor advised fund or who might, and say, this is a national day to rally people who have a donor advised
Mhm.
fund to allocate money to us. And so having a national day like that gives you an opportunity to
Yeah.
talk to people. So you need to find
Yeah.
new ways to have new dialogues that are positive.
No, I love that. And I didn't even know, is this the first year that we're doing that in
It's,
October? It
it's the
is.
second.
It's the second
Year.
year.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. No, that's awesome. I mean, is there a website or is there
Yes.
anything that we can connect
Yes.
folks with? Okay,
So
good. Okay. So
yes,
we'll
just
make sure. Yeah.
look at
What is that?
Donor Advised Fund Day,
Okay.
and you'll see it. And it's also connected to a new organization that is called DAF Share, which is actually the
Okay.
gamification of donor advised funds for
Oh,
young people.
okay.
It's like a GoFundMe married to a donor advised fund,
Oh, wow.
where a person, you could put money tax-free into a donor advised fund through
Okay.
DAF Share, but
Okay.
then you online tell your friends where you're making your donations,
Mm-hmm.
and you actually can give some of your money to
Sure.
another person, and they can then give it to who they want to give. So you start
Okay.
sharing with people who
Yeah.
you're giving money. So it's a new way. So it's like, how do we get people to now use these new tools in new ways that make
Yeah.
giving visible and exciting?
Well, and I like that because I think oftentimes, we wonder about the impact that we're making or if we're moving our resources in the right direction. And I know, sometimes it is someone coming to me and saying, "Hey, my kid has a fundraiser at their
That's
school,"
right.
or "Hey, I'm running this marathon in support of." And it does feel good. It does feel like a community when you are able to support efforts that you might not be directly connected with, but that will benefit greatly, right, from the resources that you share. Like I like the idea of that sort of, it's almost like a tree with roots in the ground sort of spreading out. Like,
Yeah.
how do we start to build further reaching connections for our generosity in this moment when we find ourselves being sort of a very polarized community, culture,
Yeah.
society.
That makes me think of two things. One, the data is showing that there are fewer donors available,
Hmm.
but they're giving more.
Yep.
And then the second aspect is sometimes people say, well, I already know who I give to, but
Hmm.
I do get requests to give to my child's school or a
Yeah.
race. And so one of the things that when I'm working with wealth advisors and their clients, I talk about, maybe when you think about next year, you set aside a certain pot of money that you will use for those requests you get from
Hmm.
friends or
Hmm.
family.
Hmm.
And again, if you reach the point where that is the amount you've already given, you just say to someone, I love the idea of your race. So, but I've already allocated the money I gave to the community this year. Let me know early next year, and I
Yeah.
would love to consider it. So you need to
Yeah.
find a nice way to say, I love what you're doing, but I
Yeah.
cannot support everything.
Yeah, no, and I think that's right because we can't do everything. I know there have also been times where I've had to say, this is not a thing that at this moment I can write a check for or come sit at the table, but I will share it on my social media. I will forward this information to other people.
It's so
I
helpful. The
will
awareness
it'll
is so
yeah,
great.
go through my network. So I see behind you just peeking out, Future Good by Trista Harris. So want to pivot a little bit because you shared with us, after you left the St. Louis Mosaic Project, that you have joined the work of Future Good, that you're moving from the space of corporate futurism into philanthropic futurism.
Yes.
So, we've talked a little bit about the realities in the landscape and the idea that the opportunity is abundance and we have to be willing to take some risks and try to use tools in new and different ways and try to bring other folks along with us. Are there other realities or shifts that you think nonprofit leaders need to start sort of reflecting on or preparing for now?
Two things. One is understanding what a true 20-year North Star could look like is something that
Mm-hmm.
then you have to pull back to, what does that mean? Once you set that, it can help you decide today, where do you need to, for example, shed programs? I mean, there's going to be a lot of breakage coming, and you're going to have to decide to maybe, unfortunately, get rid of certain programs you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's painful. But if you don't know where you're going, you don't know what to eliminate. So
Yeah.
that's something that having a North Star and a vision of really what the long-term goal is can make a big difference. And it also can help you make investments that you may need to make. I talked to an organization this week that is struggling because they need to make investments in a building and facilities.
Yeah.
But they're saying, well, why should we look so far ahead? I'm like, if you don't look far ahead, how do you know just to decide if you should expand a program in the next year or two? That's not going to help you decide
Right.
what kind of structures and facilities do you
Mm,
need. You really need to look much further ahead. And so that's
yeah.
something that is hard to do. The other
Mhm.
thing that we're seeing is there's also a move right now, because of so many uncertainties, to
Mhm.
look at the scenario planning model.
Yes. Yep.
And some of them, people call it the Eisenhower framework, but it's really looking at two aspects, such as, if we have more funding or less funding, or if these programs expand or retract, what happens? Because what currently happens is often a leader and the board or their leadership team is like, this is what we want to happen and this is what we're planning for. They don't want to look at those other two or
Mm-mm.
three options that are maybe not so positive. But if
Yeah.
you don't, you're missing the picture. And so to do scenario planning, and if you look at the wearefuturegood.com website,
Mhm. Mhm.
there's a webinar that I did last year about scenario planning,
Oh,
and the
awesome.
book Future Good talks about the model of scenario planning.
Mhm.
So using the tools of scenario planning with your team
Yeah.
and the board can help you put maybe a little bit of activity in some of those quadrants that you really hope don't happen, but they
Yeah.
could. And, with all the structural change we saw last year, you'd say that would never happen. Things did.
Things
And
did.
that's going to keep happening. So I really do think that scenario planning this coming year we're going to see more of a resurgence in it, because people
Yeah.
need to start putting a little bit of their energy in areas that they hope don't happen, but might.
Yeah, no, I hear that. I think, even in our work, we've gotten a few requests for
Yes,
those scenario plannings, and then the green lighting criteria. How do I know what kind of decision I need to make? And is it when we hit a certain financial goal? Is it
that's
when
right.
we've hired up to capacity? Is it, when we have more certainty about the policy priorities in our region? And along with that, for a few of the organizations we've worked with, we've really had to sit with the board and do some workshopping on what right sizing might look like. And
Yes.
so even, organizations they have their turf. They like to keep their turf. And sometimes when we get curious, when we do a risk assessment, when we look at the ecosystem, the program that we offer might be wonderful and might benefit many folks, but it might actually do better being housed in another
Yeah.
organization, right? And if we are able to spin that program or priority off, how then are we able to reinvest our resources in sort of meeting this moment right now? And so we've started to sort of have some of those conversations with organizations. We've had to introduce language about merger. And honestly, Betsy, I know you and I have talked about this offline, but like the dignified sunset, right? There are a lot of organizations that have been cobbling it together with tape and glue and are in a moment now where they really are looking at what happens if we don't exist anymore? What happens in this ecosystem? And how do we make sure as an organization that we are deploying whatever assets we have to our partners, to our community members, so that even if we, the organization, don't exist, the work can continue to go
And
on.
that's something that I know that you and your Gladiator team add such value, when your clients can share your knowledge with their own team and their
Mhm.
board about what has to happen, and just whether it's sunsetting, whether it may be new shared resources, or a
Yeah.
dialogue with somebody that either shares the same group of clients, or a mission, or even a
Mhm.
geography
Yeah.
that, you might say, we never thought we would need to do this, but new times require new ways of looking at our facilities. You might, start to look at changing the way your leases are done over the next 3 years.
Yeah.
Things don't happen immediately because you've got commitments to
Mhm.
programs or facilities,
Mhm.
but if you don't start planning for it, you won't have it. And I also think that foundations and donors can appreciate that you might need money
Yeah.
to shed, or
Yeah.
to merge a facility, or to share some back office
Of
resources.
course. Yeah.
They want you to be more efficient and serve
Mhm.
the clients better. And I
Yeah.
think that donors they want honesty, and they want to fund you to do what's right for the clients. They're
Yeah.
not here to perpetuate you as an organization. They're supporting you because they believe that that cause needs assistance, whether it's the arts, whether it's the
Yes.
social service, whether it's education. They believe in that need. And
Yeah.
when you say this is the right way to serve our community, they can hear you.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree with that. And that truly, I mean, not only has that been my experience with our clients and helping them in relationship with their donors, but even for me as a donor, to a community organization, to my kids' school, to other places, having them come to me and say, hey, we know that you've been a part of the monthly giving club, or we know that you've been coming to our awards dinner every year, and this year we actually need you to consider donating towards this particular purpose, which in some cases might feel really unsexy, but is the priority that is necessary to move the work through this crisis moment, to move the work to a place of stronger sustainability. And I think you're right. I think most donors are what you've described. They are like me, where they want to do what's helpful. They want to do what's useful. When you think about, philanthropy in its current state and sort of what this moment is demanding of all of us, where do you think philanthropy has the opportunity to go from this moment?
I think that philanthropy and those who have resources see the need that they're going to have to do more. And I think whether it's the Giving Pledge, there's another new organization called
Sure.
Level Up, which
Okay.
is getting sign-ons from foundations to take their percent payout up over the next 2 years.
I like
And
that.
so I think looking at things like Level Up and what does it mean, and asking people who have been your supporters, could you know what's happening? You know what happened with some of our grants. You know what's happened with
Yeah.
our fund.
Yeah.
Could you do something more in the next 2 years? And something that you just said, which was, how do you consider doing more? Someone told me that using the word consider is really a powerful word, because if you say, Betsy, will you give more? I have to go yes or no. If you say, Betsy, would you consider doing more? I can say, yes, I can consider. So I
Yeah.
really think considering. And if you ask
Yeah.
people to consider doing more the next 2 years, because we are in such a time of flux, the people who love what you do and who trust you and care, they will consider doing more. And I think, you need to understand that that is an important ask and an important consideration, that those donors are not, they're going to expect to hear from you.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
want to hear from you, and they want to hear the stories of what's going on,
Yeah.
and they want to know that you really do count on them.
So, in this space where there's all these competing priorities, what are a few things that you feel like nonprofits and philanthropy are actually sort of doing well right now in terms of how we're responding to this moment, or how we're sort of staying resilient?
I think that there's more storytelling that's going on. I think everyone is understanding the power of
Yeah.
storytelling.
Yep.
I think there is more attempt to have different ways for people to contribute. I do think this whole question of younger donors is going to be a challenge that organizations are going to struggle with, because to get younger donors, you need to organize differently.
Yeah.
You need to, for example, have new kinds of volunteering, because younger donors who are 25 to 45 want to volunteer often before they give. And it's not like organizing your traditional volunteers who want to just come in and volunteer for a project. But if
Right.
you're considering people who might be younger donors or even significant donors, you might have to craft new kinds of donor experiences for younger donors and treat them differently. And you may or may not have the resources to do that. So I
Yeah.
think there'll be some strategic discussions about, can you afford to go after younger donors
Yeah.
in a meaningful way, or do you have to put that on hold?
And are we willing to, and I
Right.
feel like, Betsy, that's been a conversation that, for at least for me, I feel like has been going on for the
Yeah.
last decade or so. I know a few years ago when our firm was working with Forward Through Ferguson, we had an opportunity to do sort of a matching gifts fundraiser with Cash App. And so Cash App had offered to, match an amount of money that was raised, and, 24 hours by all their users. And so we had to like set up a Cash App account and then connect it to our bank account. And at that time, the director of operations was like, we don't have a policy for
That's
this.
right.
How do we acknowledge these donors? How do we, and so there were a lot of pieces to your point that sort of goes beyond what is the technological platform and what does that donor expect. There is, how do we then build the policy, the practice, the comfort with taking resources in a different way.
Yeah.
I mean, I even think now, when I was growing up, every Sunday my dad would hand me a $20 bill, and that was, gas money, my allowance, my lunch money for the week. Every Sunday now, my son sends me a text, Mom, I need you to Venmo me.
That's right. So when I am talking to different nonprofits, I'm looking to see if their donor online website, if it has an area for identifying DAF interests. Some do, and many don't. Sometimes there's still a paper that you get about donating if you're an event for them, for example. Yes. And do they have a place to check if there's a donor advised fund option?
Yeah.
Most have not moved to Venmo or Zelle yet.
Yet.
But they're all looking at how they can do that. And then I think also looking at AI policies and sharing and looking and learning about what is your AI policy going to be? How are you going to identify your policies? How are you going to share what your policies are? And think about that as something that is coming quickly.
Yeah, no, I love that. So people that are listening to this very brilliant and informative conversation have gotten lots of different ideas. For people that are feeling overwhelmed or, who are juggling sort of different kinds of competing priorities, what are a few starting points, or where would you advise, these visionary leaders to sort of really dig their heels in it and kind of get started?
Really think hard about what is the most important to the cause that you're serving, so that you can, on your own or with the help of someone like Gladiator, can decide what are the must-have priorities and what are possibly those right sizing or programs or activities that you just may have to think hard about getting rid of over the next 2 years and finding a new home for them or sunsetting them and having those really hard thoughts. And I think that is really, this is the time for it. Yeah. And also to identify what costs might be involved to do that, because you don't just turn them off. And then think about, how do you talk to donors about what is new that needs funding for growth to serve your clients, and then what might need funding to sunset.
Sure. No, I think that's a wonderful list. So last question for you. What is giving you hope right now?
My hope comes from the fact that there are going to be many bright spots, that new technology, AI is going to have pain, but it's also going to have opportunities where certain things, just like spreadsheets got rid of a lot of things that we used to do by hand, AI is going to allow us to have some potentially more time for human activities. That if some of our work can be automated, we may have more time for family, for caregiving, for leisure, for the arts. And I think many arts organizations should be thinking that there may be a renaissance of time where people will have more ability to take advantage of culture and caring.
I love that. That's really beautiful. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. How can our viewers get a hold of you?
They can connect at wearefuturegood.com.
Okay. Awesome. Perfect. Well, thank you for joining me, Betsy. We will be back with you in 2 weeks. So what is that? Friday, March 20th, I think. Y'all, what is time these days? So I hope everybody is well. If you were here in the St. Louis region, I hope that you were out enjoying the sunshine and listening to us in your AirPods. So happy to send everybody off into their weekend, and we'll see you soon. Bye, Betsy.
Thank you.